You know what? To this day, I find myself called away. I mean, transported in time and in space by the powerful cinnamon scent of Dentyne chewing gum. Have you ever noticed that certain distinct smells can do that? Bring you back to a place so familiar. Dentyne has become like holy incense to me. One whiff of it, and I am suddenly 6 years old, sitting between my grandmother and my sister, and the high end of the wooden pew in her church. Nanny would take us to the Lakewood Heights Baptist Church on Sundays when we had stayed the night at her house for whatever reason. And as much as I thought that she was a strict woman, I remember that she almost playfully kept my sister and me in line with offers of Dentyne. I mean, she'd glare at us as soon as we got fidgety. And our frightened silence turned to smiles as she reached into her black bag, pulled out the package of gum, and offered it to us in exchange for obedience. And she would hold it just where we could see it and whisper these magic words. You want some chew gum? Now, she also taught us to draw cubes on the worship bulletins. Start by drawing one box. Simple enough. Draw a second box so that it overlaps just a little bit in the corner. And connect all the corners with straight lines, and you have a cube. You can try it if you want. Filling a bulletin full of cubes could get many children through many sermons. And even now, I can smell Dentyne or see a cube and imagine that I am in that place once again. There are just certain aromas that trigger our memories and take us to places inside that hold power over our hearts. Kind of like the smell of freshly cut grass mixed with gasoline in a fresh, warm spring breeze. Because I can picture my father mowing the lawn, me walking behind him. There's a favorite dish that I am sure you remember. A family recipe. And maybe it was even handed down the generations from the old country, wherever that was. Your grandmother's lasagna? I don't know, strudel. Ah, yes, that would make sense around here with the Germans who settled in these parts, wouldn't it? I'll tell you what, though. I can track the scent of burning hickory wood for miles around like a bloodhound. Slow smoked pork shoulder, Boston butt, cooked so that the hickory smoke does all the work for you, chopped up into this almost fine dust of fine powder of meat and served hot. I'm going to have to close this out early, get to lunch. You get a dose of vinegar and tomato-based red sauce and a bowl of what we call Brunswick stew, a slice of cornbread. I have just described to you what I might expect to be served in heaven itself. But it was found primarily at a place called Harold's, near the penitentiary in Atlanta where Al Capone served his time and died. A meal so sacred and so out of this world delicious that it has fueled my quest for the best Southern barbecue for years. And while I have for some time now determined that the Deep South is in fact a good place to be from, I still long for that unique flavor and that powerful aroma that defines the place that I will always call my home, even if I do not live there. Are you with me? A pilgrim settling new lands though I may be, there ain't no hole-in-the-wall Southern barbecue joints around these parts, and every now and then I just need a fix. Nothing makes any of us feel at home like the right meal. Broiled fish now, same thing for some people. Broiled fish, like in this story. Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." They were startled and terrified and thought that they were seeing a ghost. But he said to them, "Why are you frightened, and why do doubts arise in your hearts? Look at my hands and my feet. See that it is myself. Touch me and see. For a ghost does not have flesh and bones as you see that I have." And when he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. And while in their joy they were disbelieving and still wondering, he said to them, "Have you anything to eat?" They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate in their presence. Then he said to them, "These are my words that I spoke to you while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms must be fulfilled." And then he opened their minds to understand the Scriptures, and he said to them, "Thus it is written, that the Messiah is to suffer and to rise from the dead on the third day, and that repentance and forgiveness of sins is to be proclaimed in his name to all nations, beginning from Jerusalem. You are witnesses of these things." There are 5 different stories about Jesus appearing to his disciples after the resurrection. 4 Gospels, 5 different stories. But they almost all have the same pattern, in that Jesus appears to them, but then the disciples are filled with doubt. And really, who could blame them? For all that they had been through, they had given their whole lives to follow this man who just captured their hearts and imaginations. They loved their teacher for all that he said and all that he had done over those 3 years they spent together. To have seen Jesus crucified, it must have felt like a devastating indictment on all that they believed and dreamed and had invested their very lives in. And so we find that in each of these stories, they are filled with doubt. And you know, it's funny how Thomas gets remembered as the doubting one, isn't it? Because it was all of them, even standing there in the risen Christ's presence, they were filled with doubt. The pattern is that Jesus offers himself, his own body for them to see and to touch, with the wounds of that cross still visible in his hands and his feet, and in one story, his side. It is not just a vision, wishful thinking perhaps, a ghost even. It is Jesus, the crucified one, risen in their very presence. Peace be with you, he says. But now several of these stories also say that Jesus had something to eat with them when he appeared after Easter. Bread, fish. An interesting little detail. And Luke tells us here that what they gave him was broiled fish. Broiled fish. Well, now that's a Galilean specialty if there ever was one. I mean, you know you can't just get fish in Jerusalem. But they've got to import it from up there, you know? Jesus and his disciples, well, now they're having a taste of home, aren't they? Broiled fish, you are not going to forget. Like hickory smoked southern pork barbecue, I imagine. As strange and as foreign as it is for these Galileans to be trying to grasp that their crucified Jesus is standing there in the resurrected flesh, they have this familiar meal served up and shared and remembered. Broiled fish is what men who fished the Sea of Galilee themselves together would remember sharing on the shore after a successful day out on the lake. I mean, you can't just get that anywhere. It's a taste of home. Broiled fish? Well, that's just about all Jesus had to work with when he had those same disciples feed something like, what was it, 5,000 people one day up in Galilee on a hillside? A little bit of bread and just a couple of fish. Ah, yes, a powerful aroma from their past. What happens? In the midst of all that seems out of place and foreign about Jesus' resurrection, all that goes against experience, knowledge, intuition, the disciples suddenly feel right at home with broiled fish. And Jesus, like we find in all of these stories from his appearances, Jesus then sends the disciples forward to all the ends of God's earth to speak the good news, to be the good news, to teach the good news. But it seems like first they all had to feel like they were somehow at home in this new place where Jesus had been buried and yet lives again. Well, now maybe what they really had to discover is that resurrection is not actually the foreign place. And that the foreign place actually is where it is death does have the final word. But home is where resurrection has always been true. Maybe that's what they had to discover. Do you know that we believe in resurrection because we somehow know already that it's true? We resonate with the story of resurrection, as if our very souls were already aware of it. I think we've just forgotten that that's where our home is. Now, we've been taught otherwise over the years throughout all of our lives. But when we see resurrection, when we feel it, when we even taste it, we realize it's been true all along. I mean, the earth around us, every single year, dying and then living again. Have you seen that? I mean, the scriptures themselves, when Jesus opens our minds to understand them, I mean, we see that resurrection has been the way of God all along. I mean, the God breathes life into the very mud of the earth, and we become who we are. The slaves liberated from Egypt, they become a new nation. The exiles return from Babylon, and the nation is reborn. The broken and spoiled pot returns to the house of the potter, and the potter reworks it and makes it into a new vessel. And the valley of the dry bones becomes a living people once again. We have known this all along, actually, deep down in our souls. God's way has always been that of resurrection. And in it, that is where we find we are at home. And when Jesus sends us forth into mission, he does so with this promise that we will always be at home wherever we go. So go wherever he sends you. I saw one of his disciples who'd been sent out just the other day at that car wash over on 10th Street. The one where they actually wash your car by hand, not the machine. I didn't know that this here could be a home for a disciple, but there she was. With all this rain, you know, we get one fine day, and you know how it is, you're going to get that car clean. And so I pulled up driving Roddy White into the car wash. That's my car's name. Before Roddy White, I drove Frank the Tank. But this new car, my daughter gave the name of Roddy White. You can Google it if you need to know. I was sitting there with the windows down and this awful little clunker pulled up next to us, an old Ford Escort. You remember those? Coughing and wheezing as it came to a stop. Rust had eaten away through the fender over the left front wheel. Paint had splotches on the top, you know, over the trunk and over the engine. From all those years in the sun. Dents, tape holding parts of it together. We used to call that Alabama chrome. And you know, my car is about to get its shine on. We're going to drive off the lot in style. Roddy White looks over at this rust bucket and laughs. He says, "What's a wash going to do for you? You're going to be the same mess you is now after spending $15. And for what?" My windows were down. I don't always hear my car act this way, but that other car, she just said, "Hush now, you hush. I got more miles on this set of tires than you've got all together. I am a classic. Besides," she went on, "my driver depends on me." Roddy gets a real kick out of this line. "Depends on you?" Oh, heavens. "Yes, that's right. And believe it or not, I am dependable at my old age. I have to be. My driver teaches third grade, and those kids, they depend on her. So, yes, she depends on me." Roddy says, "Third grade, huh? Guess she can't afford much more than you." "As a matter of fact," that other car said, "I am all that she needs. Besides, my girl is happy. Can you say that about your driver?" Roddy's laughing out loud at this point. Happy? Oh, I'm the only one that ever hears someone that fool says. Happy? I don't know. So what? Tell me. Is your driver, she just singing while she's driving all the time, happy? What does happy look like anyway? Now, I thought Roddy had asked a really good question here, and so I paid close attention to the answer. "It's funny," the other one began. "There's a lot of days when she sits down at the wheel after school, and she just starts crying for all that she's seen and all that she's been through. Those kids she's got, some of them, a lot of them, you wouldn't believe what they're living through, and she just cries and she prays. Other days, she just sits behind the wheel with this look of utter satisfaction on her face. Sometimes, she about falls to sleep on the way home. She's so exhausted." "Ain't none of that sound like happy to me," Roddy said, which I thought was a good point. "Are you serious? You think happy means easy? You think happy means it never hurts? My driver is happy. She's made for this life, and every day she knows it. She says when she's praying to God that she feels like she belongs here, now. And it is like she's at home in this life." And then we drove off.